Will you join me in prayer? Holy God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe comes a legend. The legend of Voltron, defender of the universe. A mighty robot loved by God, feared by evil. As Voltron's legend grew, peace settled across the galaxy. On planet Earth, a galaxy alliance was formed together with the good planets of the solar system. They maintained peace throughout the universe. Until a new horrible menace threatened the galaxy, Voltron was needed once more. This is the story of the superforce of space explorers entrusted by the Alliance of the ancient secret of how to assemble Voltron, defender of the universe. As a child of the 80s, I was on the receiving end of the first and second waves of Japanese entertainment making its way across the Pacific. One of those cartoons was called Voltron. Voltron was this gigantic robot that was made up of 5 smaller robots controlled by 5 different human beings who have different skills and different abilities, right? And each one of these smaller robots represented a different strength, skill, or ability. I loved Voltron when I was a kid. Not only was the show just super awesome, but it was a stroke of marketing genius as an adult. Well, we could just sell one toy to all the kids in the world, or we could sell 5 toys that make up the one toy. You got to follow that money, y'all. But in those show's episodes, the characters would have to fight some great evil menace that has come to Earth. And each episode has the characters trying to take on the evil by themselves. Well, maybe if the evil monster was coming from the ocean, the character who was best suited for swimming would try and fight it on their own. And of course, it was never enough. As an adult, it's completely predictable. Someone tries to fight on their own and lose, even if they have a cool, highly specifically trained robot. But that's when the team assembles and they form Voltron. They get this one big robot where one robot is the leg, another robot's a leg, arms, head, chest, all of it. That's how they combined to beat the evil monster. And it was always that way. Not once in the entire show's history did a character ever win on their own or come close to winning on their own by themselves. You know, it's amazing how my generation grew up watching shows like that, learning the importance of working together. And we think that we can do this on our own. Paul's letter to the Corinthians was written to remind the very young church in Corinth that we, the church, are to move with love. Corinthians includes the famous love is patient, love is kind that we talked about last week from weddings. And we use that scripture in weddings because it's the only definition of love that we ever really find in Scripture. Yes, there are allusions to what love is, and instructions for us to love. But Paul gives us a dictionary definition of what love is. So of course we read that scripture at weddings, not only because we've formed it into beautiful poetry, but because it's a directive to those who are being wed. You all say you love each other. Well, here's a definition for you to grab onto. And by the way, the definition is not a list of things that love does on its own. It's all a bunch of actions that we have to do in order to show love. So in the same way that we use that part of 1 Corinthians as an authority in weddings, So is the rest of 1 Corinthians. Paul is instructing the church on how to love. There was this squabble in the Corinthian church about whose gifts were more important, better, and whose gifts brought them closer to God. And they were creating within themselves a caste system, saying one person is more important than the rest of them because they have this role or they have that skill set. And that brings them closer to Jesus because of those roles. All of that flew into Paul's face as antithetical to God's realm. Paul understood God's realm to be one where all people have a role, where all people are treated equally and justly. Yes, Paul. And that just because you are better than others at something, that doesn't put you in a higher place. It doesn't make you closer to God. Paul's reminder to them is directed at both those who are claiming to be higher than the others, but it's also directed to those who are perceived to be lower. Paul's saying that you people need to stop pretending that you are closer to God. And you, who think you're on the lower end, you need to recognize your gifts and start seeing them as good, worthy, and the same gifts and roles as the others. And despite some of Paul's own writing and our quite often misinterpretation of Paul's thoughts on women, Paul believed and encouraged congregations that he helped create to step into this new reality. Let us remember that Paul not only said this in this scripture this morning, but he also said it in Galatians, that there is no slave or free, no Jew nor Gentile, no female nor male. In the realm of God, the boundaries, the borders, the binaries that we have all created are gone. There is no hierarchy. All spiritual gifts are needed and all spiritual gifts are celebrated. My family, my immediate family, we don't do traditions. I don't know if you all do or not, but we're just not a tradition family. I mean, sure, my dad and I go to White Castle when I get home to Kentucky. Or my parents make me bean soup and cornbread when I get home to Kentucky. Traditions I both love. But we don't have that annual trip to the lake, or we don't have a specific way of opening Christmas presents. My family is just not that family. It's not that we're a bad family, it's just not who we are. But there's been a tradition building in my family, in my mom and dad's house, over the last 15 or 20 years. My mom and dad have been hosting my mom's side of the family for Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving Day for about 20 years now. And on Thanksgiving morning, right before the brood of before my loving family members arrive, my parents and my Aunt Peggy and my brother and I, if we're there, we will sit down to watch the National Dog Show. My favorite part is to do like my best John O'Hurley impressions, which isn't good, because he's just Jay Peterman to me from Seinfeld, and so I just say, "Oh, Elaine, that chow chow," just because it's just so fun to say. But the National Dog Show and all dog shows, I've never understood. How is it that you can compare dogs that are so different from one another and say this one is the best? It never made sense to me. How can a dog with little bitty paws be compared to a dog with great big paws? And how can a dog with short hair be compared to a dog with long hair? How can a shepherd be compared to a retriever? How can they say that this retriever, who is great and big and excited in the yard, but comes into the house and is just as big but clumsy, is better than a Pomeranian who can be carried even to a bowling alley? I mean, I got it when they were doing the dogs in their specific classes, the working dogs, the hunting dogs, the toys, the terriers. But when it's the best in show, I didn't get it. When one year I had finally had enough of this questioning in my head and the nonsense, I finally decided to voice my distaste. How do they do this? This doesn't make sense. That's when old Randy Deskins, from his Lazy Boy of Wisdom, told me, Jay, they aren't comparing them to each other, but what they are doing is they're saying that that Rottweiler is a better Rottweiler than that Pomeranian is a Pomeranian. I love dogs. I mean, I definitely prefer medium-sized dogs, but dogs of all sizes are welcome in my book. Just not so much of the drool. Just I can handle a little, not a lot. But I know that all dogs have their place in our world. A family with growing children may like the high energy of a golden retriever, but a hunter may want a hunting dog to go get the ducks. Or a senior citizen may want a toy dog because that's what they can handle. And a junkyard owner may want a pack of Dobermans. They're all dogs, but they aren't compared to one another. Now, before I go any further, please don't hear me comparing human beings to dogs. That's not at all what I'm doing with this illusion this morning. But y'all, we're a different breed. You know that, right? We, Chalice Christian Church, we're a different type of dog. We have differing gifts, our differing breed abilities, and we need to stop comparing ourselves and worrying about our comparisons to the other churches. We aren't those breeds. We aren't being judged in comparison to them. On that great day of judgment, God's not going to look at us and say, your church had 20 members and this church had 5 million. Guess who wins? But are we being the best Chalice we can be? When we assemble into our version of Voltron, where the robots are doctors, lawyers, teachers, students, veterans, pastors, all those little pieces of robots to make our big Voltron. There is not another church like ours. We may not be the biggest Voltron or the biggest dog on the block. And just because we may be small, it doesn't make us any less Christian. If you've ever been bitten by a chihuahua, you may know that small does not mean not active. We're not biting people, though. And just because we are trying to sell this building, it doesn't make our presence in this community any less needed. And just because we don't have a gigantic LED light board behind us or a full rock band, it doesn't mean that our worship is any less good, any less worshipful, or any less authentic. And just because our immediate future is unknown right now, it doesn't change us from being able to be agents of God's hope. In the same way that we as individuals are all created and celebrated by God, so is our church body celebrated by God. In the same way that the intro to Voltron, as I so dramatically portrayed for you all this morning, in that same way, we, the church, have been entrusted with the alliance with the ancient secret on how to assemble. And our intro begins with Chalice, extravagantly welcoming, unapologetically progressive, seeking God's justice in the world. It's time for us to assemble. So let's not be afraid to be the body that we have been created to be. Let's not be shackled by comparisons, by our histories, or by our expectations. Let us shed envy and embrace us. Embrace ourselves, Chalice, for the unique, diverse breed of Voltron Church that we are. It's time to assemble, y'all. Let's go.